Good afternoon, everyone. How's the conference so far? Thanks. So unlike Scott, I'm not Scott. He's the Super Bowl, I'm the halftime show. So if he's Super Bowl, I'm Katy Perry. I'm going to be talking about a very interesting technology called Cordova. Why is Cordova interesting? Because these days there are people, little children sitting in their parents' basements turning into overnight millionaires because they suddenly discovered how to write a mobile app. When we write an app these days, there's so many technologies to learn. ASP.NET 5 is awesome, but you got to learn it. JavaScript is awesome, you got to learn it. Then there is Swift, there is Java, there is Android. There's so much to learn. And Cordova is the one platform that allows me to use my reusable web-based skills like JavaScript, HTML, etc., and be able to target multiple app stores, Android, iOS, etc., etc. So the way Cordova works is, I'm not going to bore you with slides, etc., but the way Cordova works is that they put, a web view in the middle of a native application, and then they enhance that native application to provide JavaScript hooks, so you have the ability to tap into native capabilities using JavaScript. So if you want to tap into camera, geolocation, rotation, the shaking of the iPhone, barometer, all of those facilities are usable through JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript, you can write mobile applications. This thing that you're looking at over here is what Cordova supports. On the left over here is the various native capabilities, and on the top are the various platforms. So you see that it works everywhere. But obviously, one downside of Cordova is, Mark Zuckerberg famously said many years ago that our basic mistake was to target, on HTML5 for mobile. Things have moved on since then. The web browsers have moved on. The JavaScript engines have gotten a lot better, and new interesting technologies have come up. So, for instance, similar technologies to Cordova are like Cordova, React Native, NativeScript, or just native. These are the ways you can target native applications without going 100% native. You can target iOS without writing Swift or Objective-C, or Xamarin C# for that matter. Cordova is slightly different from React Native and NativeScript because React Native and NativeScript compile down to 100% native. But Cordova allows us to have a web view in the middle, which means you have the ability to update your application like you would update a website. So you don't have to go through app stores. Of course, there are limits to that. Apple doesn't like, they might reject your app if you're going crazy with that. But to a large extent, you have the ability to do that. So I figured I have, very little time. So I thought mostly what we'll do is, I was thinking what I'd present in this presentation. And I thought that, let's put the hat on of, like a person sitting in a basement trying to become a millionaire by writing an app. And I thought I'd, write an app all the way from scratch to finish in the next few minutes. And I'll also demonstrate, how Microsoft is contributing to this and what is the interoperability story between these open tools and Microsoft Visual Studio, for that matter. So let me start. I'm going to go ahead and right-click here, open terminal here. And the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to install Cordova. But in addition to Cordova, I will also install something called Ionic. Ionic framework uses Angular to be able to give you native-like controls on iOS and Android. So they perform just like native. Now, of course, if you're writing a game and you want to use the high-end acceleration and all of that, Cordova is not the right platform for you. But for business applications, you won't be able to tell the difference. So let's go ahead and install Ionic. So I'm going to go sudo npm install g Cordova Ionic. So this will go ahead and install Cordova and Ionic. I have to provide my password. And it'll go online. So we're going to see a lot of churning and so on because everything that I'm doing is live and it's going to go online and fetch these things off of the internet and so on and so forth. So let's give it a second. OK. While this is spinning, let me go ahead and boot my Windows machine on the side and keep it on the side just to save some time. And let me change the trackpad also. Here we go. So let's give it a second. So I've been using Windows 10 over here because I wasn't a big fan of Windows 8 because they introduced a stop button there. Here we go. OK, almost there, almost there. Now, if you were using Visual Studio, they have project templates available in Visual Studio now, where you can say File, New Project, and create a Cordova project right inside of Visual Studio. That's possible. I'm going the other way. I'm actually starting on a Mac, and I'll go into Visual Studio later. OK, so what directory am I in? I'm right there. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to create a new Ionic app. Ionic app is just a Cordova app with more things on top. So I'm going to say Ionic, start, my app. And Ionic gives us various 3 templates to start with. So I'll just choose any one of them. I'll say tabs. And this will basically go ahead and create a simple app for me. So it's downloading everything on the fly. And as you see on the right-hand side over here, it is actually creating the app for me right on the fly. See that? Right there. So let's go into that directory. Well, let's wait for it to finish. But what it is doing now is that it went ahead and added the Ionic platform iOS over here. So I'm going to go into that directory now. So let's go into my app. And what do I see in here? It's the same contents as I see on the left-hand side. You see there are these, the same tools that ASP.NET is embracing, these community-driven tools, Bower JSON, package JSON, et cetera. The same tools are being used over here. The most interesting part here, perhaps, is www. That is where your HTML JavaScript code goes. That has the ability to that is where you would write your code. That is where if I'm writing a camera application, that's what I would place a button and tap into the camera API, et cetera. I'm going to go ahead and add support for a new platform. So I'm going to say, make sure that I'm in the right directory. I'm going to say Ionic platform add Android. And when I hit enter, just watch what happens on the right-hand side. Now, this will go ahead and it'll download support for Android. And if I had an Android device hooked in, I'd be able, or Android emulator, I'd be able to start this on an Android device right there. That's basically all it takes. Of course, I have to write my logic, et cetera, also. And you also see that it also installed a bunch of plugins over here. There are a lot of things actually that Ionic makes things easy for us, even compared to native. For instance, when I want to publish an app to the iOS App Store, I have to create the same image in like 13, 14 different formats because of different resolutions. And one is for the store, one is for the screen, and so on and so forth. Ionic allows me to do that in like one shot. So there's like one command that lets me do that. If I don't have a Mac, I have the ability to run this in the cloud, for instance, because only Mac can build iOS applications due to licensing reasons. Anyway, the application is basically ready. So what I can do now is that I can go into the iOS folder, and I see there's an Xcode proj, and I can just double-click on this and start running it. Or I can do this from command line. So I can say Ionic build iOS. And it'll go ahead and build it. Ionic emulate iOS. And this will go ahead and fire open the iOS emulator over here. Whichever one you had specified as default, you can change it through command line. And it'll launch my app, as you can see. And this is an app that we just created right there, right? And this feels, like, look at how smooth the scrolling is. And if you had, millions of rows inside of here, it'll still be this smooth. Because the way, like a Swift or Objective-C applications would work is that they don't actually create, 1,000 list items over here for 1,000 items. They create just the few that you see. And then as you scroll, they dequeue a cell. They give you a handle to that cell. Then you put your data in it. And then so that way, only the cells that you see are the ones that are being created. So Ionic basically recreated that in HTML for us, right? I think that's pretty impressive. OK, so my application is ready. Now, let's see. I'm going to take this to Visual Studio next. So let's hit the Home button, and I'm going to actually uninstall this app from here. And go ahead and kill that process. And now what I'm going to do is that this project, this whole project, I'm going to move this to my Windows machine. Now, what I'm doing over here is a very lo-fi method of moving this, because typically I would do this through source control. But since I don't have source control set up over here, let me go ahead and just paste this over here. And I'm going to go to my Windows VM over here, and I'm going to open that same folder up here. Let's see. It was right there. Let's go here. This folder here, copy. And I'm going to place that somewhere on my C drive up here. Right there. Let's wait for this to finish copying. OK. So while this is copying, I'm going to start open Visual Studio right there. And I'm going to turn that project that I just copied over from my Mac, I'm going to turn that into a Visual Studio project. And let's see how hard that is to do. File, New, Project from existing code. And I'm going to point this to choose Apache Cordova here, click on Next, point it to wherever I had dropped that code, which is right there, give it a name, and click on Finish. And that's it. That's all I had to do. Now, they did introduce support for Visual Studio, in Visual Studio for Cordova. They introduced support in Visual Studio 2013. But that project structure was completely different. The 2015 project structure has been designed so it is backwards, forwards compatible between your other platforms and Windows. And that's a very good improvement. There's a very easy manual step you have to do if you want to migrate old code to new code, but it is certainly possible to migrate Visual Studio 2013 code to 2015 code also. Now, as I loaded this, you see over here, just like ASP.NET 5, we're loading these dependencies over here, same package.json, bower.json. It's going to go to Node. It's going to download all of these things. So it's getting really hard to give these demonstrations when internet doesn't work, because you can't even do file new project anymore without internet. Let's give it a second. OK, while that is happening, I'm going to so one of the challenges, obviously, is how do we debug this? Because it's running on one machine, and I can't really build an iOS application without a Mac. So I need Mac to be able to build this. So in order to support that, they've introduced something called as remote build. And remote build can be installed, again, as a Node package. I'm going to say sudo npm install g remote build. This is something that Microsoft has created. Let's go ahead and provide my password one more time. And now I've already pre-configured remote build. So, but one extra step that you have to do after you install remote build is that you have to generate a certificate. So basically, because you don't want anybody submitting build requests to my Mac. You want some level of security there. But you need a Mac somewhere on the network. Now, hopefully, I can ping that Mac. Because if I can't, then it's not going to work. But at least I'll be able to show the steps. OK, I can ping the Mac. That's good. OK. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run remote build. Now, if this is the first time you're running it, you have to run a command called remote build certificates generate. Right? And I've already done that, so I'm just going to go ahead and run remote build. And now it is running in a listener mode, and I have to go to my Visual Studio here. And here I have to search for, say, tools, and wait for it. Yeah, tools for Apache. And then I go in here and look at remote agent configuration, and I have to provide this information over there, as in which Mac will I use to build these things on. Again, what's the advantage of doing this in Visual Studio? A much better debugger. Right? That's one of the biggest advantages. Obviously, Visual Studio has a lot of other advantages, like code folding works, for one. That would be nice. So that's all I have to do. Now I'm just going to go ahead and change it to iOS platform from here. I'm going to change this to, let's say, simulator iPhone 6. OK? What dependencies are not installed? OK, well, we'll risk it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit F5. And what it'll do now is, if you observe this section here where it is building, it has submitted new build request to my Mac. And if I go to remote build over here, it says saving build request payload to, and it is a Mac that is actually doing the build now. Right? How easy was that to set up? Right? It took hardly any time. All right. So let's give it a second. OK, this is going to take some time. It's building it, and it'll fire open the application. It'll deploy it, upload it, build request, payload, and so on and so forth. So while this is happening, because I Control-C, Control-V the previous code, I'm going to continue working on the previous code so we can actually build an interesting application. Right? So let's do that. So it's compiling now. And I'm going to go over here, and let's go back into where my project was on the Mac. right? Actually, it finished, so let's give it a chance. So it just came up, right there, right? So it's the same application, but this time it is running from Visual Studio, right? OK, so if I go over here, as you see, for instance, I can say View, Solution Explorer, app.js, for instance. And I can go down here, and I can actually set breakpoints in my code, right? So let's see. I'm going to set a breakpoint, let's say here, OK? And I'm going to sort of restart this app. Hopefully, I can fire that breakpoint, maybe. Yeah, right there. So OK, I got an exception, right? But debugging on a Mac would have required me to use Safari, and Safari's debugger is just not good, right? So typically what I do when I'm writing Cordova applications, what I do is that I prefer to use Chrome running on an actual Android device. So Chrome running on my Mac, but an actual Android device on the side, because both of them are WebKit, because Safari's debugger is just terrible. Anyway, so let's go ahead and kill this. And let's come back to, let's shut down the Windows machine. And I'm going to come here, and let's get rid of this application. And I'm going to continue enhancing the original Mac application that I had. So let's go ahead and kill that simulator, come back up here. OK, so let's see, temp, my app. OK, so this www folder, how much time do I have? What time am I supposed to finish? How much time do I have left? 4:30. So I have about, OK, 15 minutes. That's cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of these. And I have a pre-written app up here. And I'm going to copy paste this content and bring it in here. So assuming that I wrote that, because I did earlier. So now how do I build this, debug this, run this, and so on and so forth? It's that there's actually, I've missed one step. So you're actually going to see a problem. It actually won't work. What this application does is that it actually plays a sound. So that it is tapping into the native device capabilities. But I haven't added any capabilities yet, which in Cordova world we call as plugins. One thing actually I forgot to mention is how do you add support for plugins in Visual Studio. So let me boot that machine on the side, and we'll check that in a second. OK, so the sounds sit inside of this folder over here. And I have some JavaScript code in here. I have an index.html. Believe me, this is really, really simple code, right? So I can just say right-click. Let's see, right-click. Can I open in brackets here? No, I can't. Let's just open in brackets. Let's open the file in brackets here. And you see here there's got hello world, play MP3. It's referencing Cordova JS and so on and so forth. And basically, in the JavaScript, there is a capability I'm using called media. So I instantiate a new file with a file path, and I just play that file. It's simple as that. OK, let me go ahead and record some sound, because that would be nice. So I'm going to fire open Audacity, and I'm going to sing a song for you guys. So let's see. Where's the mic? I'm not sure. OK, let's try that. That's my get-rich-quick scheme, a fart app. So I'm going to say export audio and sample.mp3. Let's go ahead and place that on desktop. OK, cool. And no, definitely don't save those changes. And let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. And sample.mp3. Let's go ahead and place that here. And replace. OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and open terminal one more time. So right-click new terminal here. And I'm going to go ahead, just like before, I'm going to say Ionic, build iOS. If I just not type in iOS, it'll build everything. And then I'm going to say, well, Android Home. I haven't said Android Home environment variable. The easiest way to fix that is just install Android Studio. But I'm not going to worry about Android today. So I'm going to say Ionic build iOS. And then I'm going to say Ionic emulate iOS. Just like before, it'll fire open the emulator. And it'll bring up the app. The app's implementation has changed now. It says play MP3 over there. And see, it says play MP3. It's like high resolution retina display, so it's hard to read. I'm going to hit play, and it's not working. right? It's not working. So the question is, how do I debug this? Why is this not working? So I'm going to go ahead and fire open Safari and put this on the side of this over here. I'm going to go to the develop toolbar. Look, the simulator shows in there. I'm going to choose index.html, okay? And then I'm going to go to the dock that to the right, and let's see. This debugger is terrible, which is why for this purpose I prefer to use Visual Studio. Okay, so here is the code, and if I look at this code, it's saying blah, blah, blah here. So that's where it's supposed to play the MP3. It's not working. I'm just going to hit play. And look, it says can't find variable media. Right? It's hard to read, but trust me, that's what it says. Can't find variable media. Why can't it find variable media? Now, I could have set a breakpoint and examined all the variables, etc. What's going on here is that I forgot to install a plugin. So any native capabilities that I want to be able to use for Cordova, I have to install a plugin. These plugins are, you can write your own. A lot of them are available on Git. If I was doing this in Visual Studio, adding a plugin in Visual Studio is a little bit easier. And they also have some interesting Microsoft plugins in there. Like say if I was writing an Office 365 app and I wanted to authenticate with Azure AD, it's just one click to be able to do that in Visual Studio. Whereas in command line, it's slightly more complicated, not horribly complicated. So let's go over here, and I still have that project, luckily. And let's go ahead and open this. And let's double-click on this config.xml file here. Once the project loads, give it a second. OK, double-click, ready, steady, go. Here we go. And then what you do, I double-clicked on the wrong thing. OK, right here. So here, you see that you can configure various things here. For instance, if I want to say, hey, this is not a universal app, for instance. It's an iPad or iPhone-specific app. I can change that here. But the plugins are configured right there. And you see there are a lot of interesting plugins that are available here. We have the ability to write our own custom plugins or just point to a Git repo and also manage existing plugins. So for instance, if I wanted to add a plugin for this, I would need, let's say geolocation. So I can just select this, click on add, and this will go online to Git, and it'll just download the geolocation plugin and make it a part of my project. And then I can start using geolocation-based facilities in my app. Anyway, back inside of Mac, I have the ability to add plugins from command line also. So I can say, so there is also, Ionic also comes with a plugin manager. So it's like a GUI through which you can manage it a little bit easier. But with pure Cordova, I would do it like this. I can say Cordova plugin add and the name of the plugin. So I'm going to say Cordova plugin media, because that's the plugin that allows me to tap into native media capabilities. Okay? And then I can say Ionic build iOS, just like before. Ionic emulate iOS. Right? Why can't I zoom in? Because I don't have the right window selected. And then I can say play MP3. Did you hear that? Barely. So there you go. Next, what you got to do is take this fart app, put it on the App Store, sell it for 99 cents, and retire a millionaire. Thank you very much. Love to take any questions at this time. Thanks.